Determining the root causes of World War I is not a simple task. The political, economic, and social factors that led to the outbreak of war are many complex and intertwined. At the start of the 20th century, Europe was a patchwork of alliances, rivalries, and long-standing grievances. Countries had spent decades building diplomatic relationships that were sometimes cooperative and sometimes antagonistic. These relationships were made even more complicated by intense national pride and military preparedness. Even the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, which is often cited as the spark for the war, occurred within a larger context of tension and unrest. Historians still debate the relative weight of each factor, but there is no question that Europe was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. When the assassination occurred in 1914, the intricate web of alliances and military plans quickly drew most of Europe into conflict. What might have been a localized dispute between Austria, Hungary, and Serbia instead escalated into a continent-wide war. At the same time, the role of the United States in World War I was initially one of careful observation. President Woodrow Wilson strongly emphasized neutrality and sought to keep America out of the European conflict. The American public, for the most part, agreed with this approach, preferring peace and commerce to overseas entanglement. Yet, neutrality was not destined to last forever. Even before the U.S. formally entered the war in 1917, events in the Atlantic and Europe were creating tension that challenged this policy. One of the most significant events that influenced American opinion was the sinking of the Lusitania. This tragedy did not merely make headlines. It captured the imagination and outrage of people across the world. It became a symbol of the dangers of unrestricted submarine warfare and the human cost of modern conflict. The Lusitania was one of the largest and fastest ships of its time. It represented the pinnacle of early 20th century naval engineering and luxury. In May 1915, the ship embarked on a journey from New York City to Liverpool, carrying nearly 2,000 passengers. Among these passengers were men, women, and children from a wide range of social and economic backgrounds. Some were traveling for business, others for leisure, and many were simply returning home. On the morning of May 7, the Lusitania approached British waters under bright skies and calm seas. Yet, despite the peaceful appearance of the day, danger was very real. A German submarine, the U-20, had been patrolling the area. At 20:10 p.m., a torpedo struck the starboard side of the Lusitania, igniting an explosion that would doom the ship. Within just 18 minutes, the vessel sank beneath the waves. Over 1,200 people lost their lives in the tragedy, including more than 100 American citizens. The sinking of the Lusitania highlighted the complex moral and strategic decisions that defined World War I. On the surface, it is easy to view Germany as the clear villain. A civilian vessel carrying hundreds of passengers had been deliberately targeted. Yet, the circumstances surrounding the event were more nuanced than they might appear at first glance. By early 1915, German U-boats had implemented a set of protocols known as the prize rules. These rules required submarines to surface, inspect a vessel, and allow the crew to evacuate before sinking it. However, Britain had begun arming its merchant ships and repurposing civilian vessels for military objectives. In response, Germany adopted a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, no longer bound by the prize rules. The waters near the British Isles had become perilous, and all ships entering them risked attack. These dangers were widely known, and warnings were even issued by the German embassy to the American public. Newspapers printed these warnings, sometimes right next to advertisements for voyages like that of the Lusitania. Travelers had been informed of the risk, but the human instinct to hope for safety, or to dismiss danger, remained powerful. The Lusitania itself was more than a simple passenger ship. It had been designed with the possibility of military conversion in mind. At full speed, it could easily outpace a German submarine. Even at reduced speed, the ship possessed the capability to maneuver and evade attacks. However, human decisions turned potential advantages into vulnerabilities. As the Lusitania approached the United Kingdom, the captain chose to slow the vessel to align with a higher tide. The weather conditions were challenging, and this decision was made to ensure safe navigation into the channel. Slowing the ship, however, made it a far easier target for the submarines in the area. The captain also neglected to implement zigzag maneuvers, a common tactic used to avoid torpedo strikes. Instead, the ship maintained a straight course, increasing its vulnerability to the U-20. Despite these dangers, the day of the sinking seemed remarkably ordinary to the passengers. Passengers traveled in a routine and leisurely fashion, enjoying the amenities and company aboard the ship. Children played games, families shared meals, and strangers became acquaintances over casual conversation. The possibility of a German submarine attack was largely dismissed or treated as a distant concern. There were some minor anxieties as the ship neared British waters, but overall, life on board remained calm. Lights were not dimmed, and there were no special precautions that would signal a heightened state of alert. In many ways, the passengers believed they were safe, relying on the crew and the ship's reputation for security. Even when the torpedo struck, the initial reaction was confusion rather than immediate terror. Passengers went about their routines for the brief moments before the magnitude of the disaster became apparent. The ship was equipped with lifeboats intended to save thousands of lives. There were 48 lifeboats aboard the Lusitania, theoretically enough to accommodate every passenger and crew member. Yet, the evacuation proved disastrous. Only 6 lifeboats were successfully deployed. The rest were either damaged, mishandled, or left unlaunched due to the rapid list of the ship. The captain and crew struggled to coordinate the emergency response amidst the chaos. Some lifeboats were lowered empty, causing passengers to jump into them in desperation. Others were damaged by explosions, mechanical failures, or collisions with debris. The combination of panic, technical failure, and the ship's rapid sinking created a perfect storm of fatal errors. Survivors who entered the water faced additional perils. Some accounts describe a suction effect, where the water around the sinking ship seemed to pull people downward. George Scott, a passenger, recalled being dragged beneath the waves as the Lusitania slipped beneath the surface. Time became distorted in the chaos, making it impossible to know how long he was submerged. Robert Timmis shared a similar story, estimating that he and others were pulled down approximately 60 feet. Even those who surfaced faced floating debris, hypothermia, and limited access to functional lifeboats. Many clung to wreckage, desperately trying to remain above water. Some were eventually rescued by the few operational lifeboats, while others remained in the water for hours, often succumbing to exposure. A number of survivors narrowly escaped death through extraordinary luck. Nettie Moore reached a lifeboat that initially floated, but it soon sank. Her child and husband perished in the water, while Moore herself was mistakenly presumed dead. A brother recognized movement under her eyelids, saving her life in a moment of providence. Theodate Pope had a similar experience. She jumped into the water wearing a life jacket, was pulled underwater, and subsequently lost consciousness. Rescuers assumed she was dead, placing her with other bodies. By chance, a friend realized she was still alive, and she regained consciousness hours later. These stories illustrate the thin line between life and death in such catastrophic events. Despite the chaos, the Lusitania was able to send out a single SOS message. The chief electrician, not even officially on duty at the time, maintained power long enough for the wireless operator to send a distress signal. Ships in the area received the message, but rescue attempts were limited. The region was patrolled by German U-boats, making any rescue highly dangerous. Even knowing the SOS had been sent, many vessels remained cautious, leaving survivors to struggle alone. Historians still debate the precise causes of the Lusitania's rapid sinking. After the torpedo struck, a second explosion tore through the vessel. Some accounts attribute the disaster solely to the initial torpedo strike. Others suggest that a boiler or hidden munitions may have contributed to the subsequent explosion. Evidence later confirmed that the ship carried a secret cargo of ammunition and war supplies. This discovery adds weight to theories that the second explosion was exacerbated by this hidden military cargo. The ship, while primarily civilian, was not entirely free from involvement in the war effort. Such details further complicate interpretations of blame and intent. The sinking of the Lusitania had profound political and social consequences. In Britain, the event was portrayed as a crime against humanity, demonstrating German brutality. The United States, still officially neutral, experienced widespread outrage among its citizens. The American ambassador in London emphasized the moral imperative for the U.S. to respond. Former President Theodore Roosevelt openly criticized Wilson's pacifism and called for stronger action. In the immediate aftermath, the U.S. government restrained public sentiment to maintain neutrality. However, the incident contributed to shifting public opinion, making eventual participation in World War I more likely. When the U.S. entered the war in 1917, unrestricted submarine warfare, exemplified by the Lusitania tragedy, was cited as a key justification. Propaganda and imagery of the disaster were used to rally public support and reinforce the narrative of German aggression. The Lusitania disaster remains one of the most significant maritime tragedies of the 20th century. It illustrates the intersection of technology, human decision-making, and the realities of modern warfare. The story of the ship, its passengers, and crew highlights both the vulnerability and resilience of ordinary people. It underscores the moral, political, and strategic complexities that defined World War I. Through accounts of survival, chaos, and heroism, the sinking of the Lusitania continues to provide lessons on risk, responsibility, and the human cost of conflict. Even more than a century later, the tragedy resonates as a reminder of how quickly ordinary life can be transformed by the forces of history.